Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Young Voices, Big Issues. Today, we have with us Mr. Sudhanshu Kaushik. As the founder of YIF, a youth centric political action organization in India, he has led a team of over 100 young individuals across 7 cities. The focus is on increasing youth voter registration, organizing events, and engaging members through innovative initiatives. He has also been actively involved in building a community for Indian students and professionals in North America, with a strong emphasis on fundraising for student aid. His academic interests include youth participation in electoral politics, student activism, and the impact of elections in India. He has also written a book on the youth rights movement in India for HarperCollins titled The Future is Ours. The motto of Sir's organization, Young India Foundation, is born from the simple premise: a democratic nation is defined by the power that its public holds. This space enables young minds to come together and represent themselves. And this is the book, The Future is Ours by Mr. Sudhanshu Kaushik, and it talks about the need for prioritizing youth representation in politics. I'm so excited to start as soon as this podcast ends. All right, so as of 2022, 65% of India's population is below the age of 30. So that's a major chunk of the population. And we also see how the Indian political diaspora has changed over the past decade. And we also have a lot of changes in the general behavior of this age group, with like brain drain, people going abroad, settling abroad. So, how do you think that this has influenced political participation over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's super important to ask and look at kind of the history of political representation and political participation. And I don't think you can just do it in the past few years, right? It's important to look at the history of India, right? And go back in kind of our time and see, did we have young people participating? And compared to now, like you said, we have 650 million people below the age of 25. Right. We have over 700 million people below the age of 29. But what's our participation of young people? Before the 18th Lok Sabha, which literally came into existence, and they haven't even been sworn in yet as the time of this, recording of the podcast, we had 0 MPs below the age of 30, right? In 2023, in 2022. And imagine 700 million people, no representation. Was this always the case? If you look back in time, that's not the case. So Rani Lakshmi Bai, we think about her, we're taught about her in school. You're probably being taught about her. She was 21 when she led the rebellion against the British. Swami Vivekananda ji, he was 25 when he literally went to the World Parliament of Religion in Chicago to talk about Hinduism at 25. B.R. Ambedkar ji, out of all the other things that he was told, at 25, he was part of the Bombay Legislative Council. And so many other big figures in our history, where they were very young, in their early 20s, that we are told to look up to, right? Yeah. We're doing so many great things. We all know Bhagat Singh ji, who passed, gave his life at 21. And we're told and taught that we should be like them. But whenever we raise our voice, we are unfortunately told that we're too young, too immature, too innocent to be able to be speaking about politics, to be able to talk about voting, to see what's happening in the country. Yeah. So I think there's that duplexity, right? So pre-independence, we had a lot of young people. We had a lot of young Indians taking part in the freedom struggle, trying to raise their voice. What happens after 1951, when the Constituent Assembly sits down and talks about, representation, and comes up with these age criteria, which they take from the British directly, they had no rationale, and say, 25 saal ki umar or 30 saal ki umar, 25 and 30 to contest elections. No rationale. Before they were thinking 35, someone had said, no, my niece is too old for that, let's say 25. Literally, these are discussions in the Constituent Assembly. There was no scientific rationale. And that is what we see when young people stop participating. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So you have a fewer percentage of young people actually participating as we keep going through elections. And the data proves that. So from the first Lok Sabha, which took place in 1952, to the 18th Lok Sabha that just took place in 2024, what you have seen is an average age increasing of parliamentarians. So we had an average age of about 45 in 1952. Now it's 58 in this parliament that has been elected, right? So it is constantly increased.
Understood.
More so, though, the percentage of young people,
yeah,
right, below the age of 35 has also substantially decreased too, right? So it's not as easy to say in the past 2 or 3 years to check
understood.
that.
Yeah,
You have to look at the larger framework, and you see a trend in which the percentage of representation has been decreasing of young
all right.
people.
Yeah. So, of course, you talked about this form of discrimination against the youth, which is called ageism, where you think that, oh, they're too young, so they're inexperienced and are not fit for this position.
Right.
So, can you explain a little bit about what you think the definition of this word is and how else it is pertinent in the political sphere, not only in form of representation, but also participation?
Yeah, so I mean, look, we are surrounded by isms. You've heard of sexism, you've heard of racism,
Yeah.
right? Colorism is very prevalent in India. Ageism is also just another ism. It's a discrimination on the basis of age. And now I'm not saying let's protest out in the streets, kranti lekar aao, right? Because on the basis of ageism, but understand that it's more part of our daily lives than a lot more of the other isms. So we talk about casual sexism, casual racism. We have to also consider casual ageism. And what do I mean by that? So I want to ask you, have you ever been in a part of a discussion and your parents or your family, extended family says, "Abhi to tum bachchi ho, kya karoge?"
So many times.
That's ageism, right? Have you ever, wanted to seek your opinion or say, "Oh, this, that, whatever"? And I know your mom's sitting right here, but have you been told that, okay, maybe when you grow older, maybe you can and a lot of that comes from care, but a lot of that is ingrained ageism, right? And it's societal, right? It's not necessarily specific to one kind of community or one different whatever. It's all over, right? The other thing about I think that we have to think about when it comes to ageism is obviously it's spread out, but it's based off of something, right? And it's kind of hypocritical because, for example, right now you said you're interested in politics, and you've got a supporting family that supports you. Now, if you were in another family, for example, and you said, "Oh, mujhe cricketer banna hai," right now people would support you for that, right? Training karayenge, bat le karayenge, ball ye, blah blah blah, whatever, right? Let's say you want to be an actor. Oh, an Alia Bhatt at 18 came out with her first movie, amazing, right? You want to do a startup, drop out of Stanford, karo. You want to be a billionaire, etc. Why is it that the only field in which we are so persistent about our ageism, right, is politics? We will discriminate, but you're not experienced enough to represent people, but you are experienced enough to, I don't know, go act and go on your own and go through that. It's not that it's any more or less difficult.
Yeah, you're right.
You've heard of all these horror stories about people who go into the acting field, right? You've heard horror stories of people who go into the business spectrum, right? It's so pivotal. It's all over the place. So why are we so uncertain, right? And so kind of cautious? And look, it comes from a certain degree of care too. I'm not saying that, oh, it's whatever. There are issues when it comes to our politics, which are separate from this conversation. But it's when it comes to age and young people, that is that sector, that field, that pursuit. Thinking abhi bachche ho, right? And there's a huge amount of discrimination. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, that does. So do you think that there's any particular educational qualification that is required in the youth to actually be able to kind of, to represent? I mean, I conducted an interview recently because I was writing a research paper on voter motivations. And a lot of people said that the educational qualifications of the candidate is something that matters a lot to them, but that's not really what you see. That's not what reflects in the political sphere. So do you think that there's some particular educational qualification of the youth?
I don't know. I mean, okay, so if I take my own personal experience, right? I have a bunch of degrees. Am I the most qualified person to represent, let's say, in my hometown ancestral village as a sarpanch? Absolutely not. What degrees koi kaam ki nahi? I will be the worst representative of that gaon as a sarpanch. I do not think that education has a correlation with what sort of representative you are. Right? We're talking about representation at the end of the day. Okay? We don't need, no matter whatever degrees you can get, what you need to be a good representative is that you understand the people, right? Understand their concerns, understand their issues. That is the foremost priority kind of skill trait that you need. Now, will education provide you that? Sometimes yes, sometimes not. But this idea that hame educated leadership, like, look, listen, if you look back in the past 30 years, just take 30 years, right? Post-liberalization, whatever, what you'll see is even the most educated leaders, किसी के पास doctorate थी, कोई lawyer था, कोई MBA था, कोई MBBS था, even they have done the worst scandals and corruptions. Right? So education is not a kind of, criteria or basically a distinction between good or bad, evil, good, whatever. Right?
Understood.
And so I think we need to be a little bit more open and accepting of people who come with different ideas and traits and experiences.
Understood.
Right? And there's nothing, look, that's a leader question. But as people, as high schoolers, I don't think we're talking about civic engagement enough. Right?
You're right, yeah. We know.
What's in the syllabus? I mean, I don't know, but the workshops that we were doing in high schools, people, unless they are themselves concerned, right? They are very limited in terms of even the basics of how do I vote? Agar parliament mein ek bill jata hai, how is it passed? Right? We have SST, but very basic minimum aspects. So this concept of civic engagement doesn't exist. Right? Whereas in the West, right, whether it's in high school, whether it's in college, I mean, there are colleges that won't let you register for classes if you are a US citizen, if you haven't registered to vote.
Oh.
Right? Those are those things. Yahan pe, literally half of this idea, when we can get into this later, is, we're not promoting voting enough. Forget even civic engagement. Right? So I think we need more civic engagement education values within our high schools, within our colleges, within even graduate schools, in every component.
Understood.
Even in workplaces. But again, that doesn't necessarily reflect on leaders in that way.
Understood. So another ism that's trending and been going around is, of course, feminism. And a recent legislation passed a women's bill in the Lok Sabha for 33% reservation. So despite many women participating, at least recently, we've seen a positive trajectory of participation of women. We still see only a few women in the cabinet and only a few women who are, of course, belonging to this youth criteria. So how do you think the participation of young women in particular can be enhanced?
So one correction. So when it comes to younger representatives, we actually have more female younger representatives than male representatives. So in the 18th Lok Sabha, there are 7 MPs that are below the age of 30, out of whom 5 are actually female.
Wow, okay.
Right? 3 of whom are actually Dalits. And these are on caste reserved seats, but not, of course, we don't have reservations right now as of now when it comes to gender.
Understood.
I'm not an expert in gender politics, and I don't want to speak on behalf of something that I'm not as knowledgeable about or an expert about. But what I have seen is that when it comes to, and especially the work that Young India Foundation has done, right? We help candidates contest elections independently below the age of, basically between the ages of 21 and 25 at a local level of panchayat. So we never looked at it from a gendered perspective. We went out there, we were like, who's the best candidate? Young kaun hai, kiske chances achhe hain, right? And it just turns out, statistically, हमने 52 candidates की मदद करी है, out of which half were actually women. And most of the women who contested actually won.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we have a better ratio of young women leading the way and representing. And, so for me, I have a very different approach in the fact that young women were being elected, right, in that way, and because they were the better candidate in that aspect.
Understood.
But obviously, the higher you go as an MP, then you said in the cabinet, you have very little representation.
Right.
And how do you fix that? Because, people ask me, so for example, I work on age, gender, not age, but age, right? People ask me, it's like, oh, should we have quotas for young people? And I don't know if quotas is the right answer. Right, for at least young people. What I think is, we should be making it easier. We should be promoting. We should have decreasing the age to contest and that sort of stuff. But
understood.
But I don't know if it's the quotas for age. For gender, it might be, and we'll see that in 2029. Right, we'll see the data. We'll see how it comes out. But you have to give kind of credit to the parties, the regional parties, who have already implemented this without it being a law. So the Biju
the
Janata
local
Dal,
level.
well, not even at the state level, Biju Janata Dal and Trinamool Congress in Bengal and in Biju Janata Dal in Orissa have made sure that they represent 33% women at least, and some exceeding that, as nominated. Now it's up to the public if they win or not, etc. But that's the case there.
Understood. Okay, thank you for that. So, your book, so I was reading a little bit about it last night. So, congratulations, first of all. So, it addresses something that's very relevant to what we're discussing right now. And a famous quote that you highlighted in the book was by Rabindranath Tagore, which states that the country isn't the earth beneath our feet, it's the people. So, how do you think this idea is coming alive with your current work with the YIF?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's kind of the ethos of how not only YIF works, but I think this country is, right? We're so insistent on getting so wrapped up of like a dish, the flag, the patriotism, the nationalism, which is all good. But sometimes I wonder if we lose out on who is all this representing, right? It's the people. This nation state of India, right? Is India because of Indians. And if we're not looking after our fellow young people, if we're not, concerning them, getting their voice, getting their representation, then why does all this matter, right? We need their voices.
Right.
When, in a country where you have the world's largest youth population, but also 33% of young people are unemployed, what are we fixing to solve that issue, right? When in a country we have the highest youth suicides in the world, when we have, again, one of the highest youth illiteracy rates, we can talk grand things about India, but how are Indians doing, especially when the majority of them are young? And so, that's kind of the ethos that we practice, what we want to be doing, increasing representation for young people within the political space. But that's something that I think all of us need to consider in whatever work we're doing, right? Focusing on the people a little bit more than we kind of have gotten used to.
Understood. So, also, politics in India, at least to a certain extent, is dynastic. It's hard for a new person to enter the political sphere, and it's largely influenced by money and power. So, under this status quo, what's the way ahead for someone like me, perhaps, who wants to get into politics? How hard or easy is it if I have no background in it, or if I have no connections, per se?
Okay, so let's say you wanted to join politics, Bollywood. You wanted to act. Wouldn't you have the same issues?
Right.
Do you have any connections? Do you have a director, or do you have Karan Johar as a godfather? No, right?
No.
Let's say you wanted to become a cricketer, right? And setting aside your natural talent to play cricket, do you have, I don't know, someone that's supporting you in that aspect in the cricket field, etc.? You go through these same hurdles in almost all the fields, right? Sure, the nuances are different, right? And this scale of someone, for example, making it into cricket, at least to play the IPL once the opportunities have expanded. Like, think about it this way. When we've only had the Indian cricket team, right? The ODI, etc., etc. You had 11 playing members and 15 mostly selected on the team. So a country of 1.2 billion people back then, you had these 15 people that were playing, and everyone wanted to do them. And as soon as the opportunities expanded, right? And that's the same thing in Bollywood. TK, you had the stars and celebrities, but as soon as you started getting Netflix and the Amazon and then the MX and the Tuck and this and that, you had a lot of other people getting into the space and being able to do it. You have to apply the same thing in politics and representation, right? You have to open up the opportunities and the spaces. So you can't just see, Vidhayak Saab hai, Sansad Saab hai, and that is what is politics. Politics is more than that. Representation is substantially more than that. We have this kind of ego problem because we're so, we're privileged that hum sansad or vidhayak ke niche to dekhte nahi, right? When there's so many opportunities for us to be able to actually commit to politics, right? And get engaged with it. So first thing is to open up that horizon to now, and it's being done. I will give credit to actually this government, where if you go to the parliament, if you go to the ministers, you will see a lot more young people at the tender age of 22, 23, 25, some are assistant private secretaries, right? My friend Malika Pandey comes out of no political connection, no bureaucratic connection, comes from the small state of Uttarakhand, and was able to become an assistant private secretary. People that are 50 years old get to, 45 years old, she has been able to do at the age of 23, 24. Right, and she's been with the minister a year or two, right? This was very unheard of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but that has opened up, right?
Understood.
So one is seeing that opportunity access, but it's also how do we work with this in terms of policy issues? Right now, whether it's contesting elections or whether it's voting, it's substantially difficult, more difficult than it has to be. We're happy by saying, world's largest democracy, dekho kitne log aaye, right? But we're not also thinking about the fact that, this is not my data, this is the Election Commission of India data, 300 million, 30 crore people between the ages of 18 and 30 did not vote. Ab hum to keh denge kyunki they're not interested. That's a lazy way out. That's not true. Those people are actually part of the migrant vote. Humne kabhi socha hai? They're the students who have graduated from high school. Let's say you're from Delhi, but you go and study in, let's say, hopefully Oxford or Columbia or wherever. Are you going to come back to vote? It's probably not possible you'll be able to. Right? Forget going abroad. You go to, let's say, Bangalore to study. Will you come back to study? No one can afford a 20,000 rupee flight just to come back to cast a vote when you don't even know during that time you'll have exams, you'll have an internship, you'll have something else that'll be coming out.
Right.
We've made the system so complicated. In the US, okay, actually forget it. The UK, right now. Did you know that if you go and study in the UK, you will be eligible to vote in the United Kingdom if there were elections going on?
I did not know that.
You will be allowed to because you're part of the Commonwealth nations, and because you're a student, you will be allowed to do it. They make it that accessible. In fact, I have a friend right now who is currently on, basically, they're doing their DPhil. They are on their research aspect here, right? They're an Indian citizen, Oxford nahi padhte, right? But they will be casting a vote by ballot on the general elections that are happening to take place in July of this year. Imagine. A non-citizen has that much flexibility as a student of and studying there to be able to post a postal ballot, not even there, and vote in the general elections. And here in India, if you decide that you want to vote, the only way you'll be able to do that is if you come back as a country. We are very restrictive. We don't talk about the voter suppression that goes on. So I think if you open that up as well, you will get more people that are interested, that you'll get more people that are engaged, and you'll get more people thinking about policy and politics. And politics is not about just the, iski sarkar yahan girai, iska ye kara, wo kara. It's at the core about representation. Do we have more young female women? Do we have voices that are taking into consideration of what it means to be a 18-year-old young woman growing up in Delhi with all the harassment, with all the abuse, all the environment issues, all these things? Who's voicing that opinion for me? Because the 65-year-old Sarkari Babu jo ab neta ban gaya hai, jo pichle 20, 30 years se sirf Sarkari gaadi mein ghuma hai, who will he know? What will he know about the 18-year-old and their issues? Because that's the majority of the country. So I think we need to open up those opportunities instead of just blaming people.
Yeah, that's very valuable actually. So I would also like to highlight what you've mentioned about, we've already spoken about education, right? So how do you believe the challenges with regards to access to early education, primary education, impact young people's representation, or even the thing broadening their horizons, like access to this primary education? How does that impact the early stages of life?
That's interesting. I mean, I don't think I've thought about it that much. A lot of the work that I do, really starts at like when you're 18.
Understood.
And culminates, that age between 18 and 30. That's my focus area. That withstanding, I mean, I know from just like the people around me and kind of like reading up a little, and we were talking about the civic engagement is very important. So people do a lot of like Bal Panchayats, which is basically taking government schools and primary schools and elementary and teaching them kind of the government structure, etc. So I think they've done it in Karnataka and it was really successful. I see what you're saying because look, there's conversations around the world where they're allowing 16-year-olds to vote. Right. There are scientific studies which proves that the earlier you vote, the more likely you are to be a lifelong voter. And so those are some of the things that we have heard of, that we've spoken about, but I don't know if I have the expertise to kind of talk about that.
Understood. All right. So, do you think, what impact do you think more participation of youth in politics, not only in the form of voters, but also being representatives, how do you think that's going to change the political spectrum in India?
I mean, I think there'll be a substantial change. Like I was just hinting to, is and talking about in the previous question, is what does the 65-year-old Neta know about your needs and concerns?
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
You are living in an India that is drastically different from the India that your parents grew up in. And the average politician in our country is the age of our grandparents. So imagine, do your grandparents know your specific needs and issues, your personal things, how you're growing up, etc.? Maybe your parents will probably know, but really,
Yeah.
right? And then thinking about how, we are trying to work and build a country with policies and ramifications and making sure that they're represented. So with young people, right, it's not going to solve everything, but it will make sure that the issues that need to be talked about are reaching the highest levels.
Yes.
And as long as they're reaching them, getting in the ears of where it needs to be done, I do think there will be reform, right? We didn't just get here all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
The fact that we have 33% unemployment rate amongst young people, we have one of the highest unskilled youth demographics in the entire world. Of course, the illiteracy, of course, what I was talking about, malnutrition, all these things. We didn't just get here automatically. There were serious missteps over the course of our history, right? And while we have made a lot of strides, right? One thing that I think we have forgotten to do is to ensure that we have equal representation, or at least some representation from all demographics. We've done a decent job in trying, and there's so much more work to make sure that we have elected Dalit leaders who can at least voice their representation. I mean, I shouldn't be saying this, but in this 18th Lok Sabha, we have separationists who are actually elected to the 18th Lok Sabha to voice their concerns and issues. One from Punjab, one from Kashmir, right? One is actually in jail, etc., but he's been elected.
Right. Yeah.
Both of them actually. And so we have, Dalit representation. We have, to a lesser degree, but still female representation. We have different caste representation, etc. Where's the youth representation? If you have 67 crore or 670 million people below the age of 25, where are they? Right? And it matters. It matters what's being taught in our high schools. It matters, how do we get from our home to the high school? How do you survive and breathe and have extracurriculars outside of the school?
Yeah. So what do you think that, at that age of 18, someone interested in politics, what do you think they can do to be more involved?
So lots of things. First is, it's not just enough to be vocal on Instagram. Right? I mean, great, you're being vocal, but what else can you do, right? You can make sure and start it at school level.
Yeah.
Right? Ensure that, for example, is everyone registered to vote, or does everyone understand that, they can register to vote where they're going to be going to college, where they're going to be, studying, for example, as an 18-year-old, you're in that space. Making sure that, you're actively participating in what's happening in the country, but also getting young people to care. Because at the end of the day, one of the biggest issues is that if we don't have enough young people voting, then it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, if there is a constituency and there are a majority of young people that are out there and they will cast a vote, then the elected official, the party, has to listen to you because they want to win.
Yeah.
So we did some data for this book, right? And we realized that there are 60 parliamentary constituencies, 60 parliamentary constituencies, right? And over 170 assembly constituencies in different states, jahan pe student vote sabse zyada hai. Right? So basically, let's just take, I'm going to give an example. We're in Delhi, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about North Campus, DU, Delhi University, right? It is basically in a assembly constituency where the elected official is 56 years old from the Aam Aadmi Party. Okay? That assembly constituency has all the DU school universities. Right, on North Campus.
Right.
वहाँ पे PGs भी हैं, वहाँ पे जो भी campuses, etc. Everyone is there.
Yeah.
Right. Now that person won by around 20,000 votes only. Right. And total votes he got was about 45,000 votes. Okay? So 45,000 votes. Now, can you believe it that in the recent Dusu elections, 90,000 young people came out to vote? Just Dusu elections, just student elections that have no constitutional authority, just Dusu basically in the North Campus.
Yeah.
90,000 people came out to vote, students.
Wow.
Now imagine if those students were also allowed and eligible to also vote in that assembly constituency because they're studying there, they're living there, most of them, right? Sure, some of them live outside, whatever it is, but so many of them, right? How they would build and shift the dynamic. Right. Then the students would be electing who would be their MLA.
Right.
So, but that takes time and it's a process. We have to convince these young people to vote. There's actually a system and a law that actually allows, but we just don't promote it enough. The politicians don't promote it enough. The election commission doesn't promote it enough. But you're actually allowed to vote from where you study, regardless of wherever your domicile is. So I think if we raise awareness about this, we can be more effective. And of course, you have more things about writing and doing podcasts and being more vocal about it. But at the basics, if we're not voting, to what is all this?
What's the use? Yeah. Okay, got it. So is there anything else that you would like to tell the viewers?
No, I mean...
And elaborate a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, I mean, so basically Young India Foundation, we were working and registered over 1 million young voters between the ages of 18 and 30 throughout the past 12 months. Now, we're now interested in ensuring two things. One, we have a campaign to decrease the age of candidacy. So right now you have to be 25 and 30 to contest for MLA or MP elections, upper house and lower house.
Yeah.
We want to decrease that to 21, make it more reflective of all democracies in the world, right? India has the highest age of candidacies, but also somehow the highest youth demographic in the world. Whereas, let's say in America or the UK is an aging demographic, meaning they have a lot of baby boomers, the age of our grandparents, right? And very young youth demographics, but yet they have an 18-year-old and 21-year-old age limit, right?
Yeah.
To contest office. And so, we're pushing for that.
Right.
And the second is we have a think tank called the Center for Youth Policy, where we are building research specifically on youth civic engagement. So young people, or people in general, journalism, media, politicians are equipped with the information to talk about young people with stats, with officials.
Got it.
And of course, I wrote a book. It's called The Future Is Ours, The Political Promise of India's Youth. It's published by HarperCollins, where you'll just see me ranting just like this about a lot of the youth dynamics. And a lot of some of it is kind of outdated now because we have this, but the theory behind it is still the same. And unfortunately, the disconnect is also the same because nothing has changed.
Thank you so much for coming and spreading all this information and awareness.
Yeah, thanks for having me and best of luck.
Of course. Thank you. As Sir rightly believes, to combat India's gerontocracy, we need to prioritize youth representation in politics. Thank you, Sudhanshu sir, for joining us today and sharing your invaluable insights. All right, folks, that's it for today. Remember, be the change you wish to see. Stay engaged, stay informed. Until next time.